The autumn rain hammered against the windows of Riverside Military Academy as Sarah Martinez walked through the polished corridors, her civilian clothes marking her as different from the sea of gray uniforms around her. At 28, she was older than most instructors, let alone the cadets who whispered and stared as she passed. Her weathered hands and the slight limp in her left leg told stories she wasn't ready to share. The academy's director, Colonel Harrison, had been desperate when he hired her. 3 previous instructors had quit within months, unable to handle the notorious Class 7. These weren't ordinary troublemakers. They were the sons and daughters of military elite, politicians, and wealthy donors. Entitled, arrogant, and convinced that rules didn't apply to them, they had made it their mission to break every authority figure the academy threw at them. Sarah's first day started quietly enough. She introduced herself simply as Ms. Martinez, a new physical training and tactical instructor. The 43 cadets in Class 7 sized her up like wolves evaluating prey. At 5'6", with shoulder-length brown hair and simple workout clothes, she didn't look like much of a threat. "Where's your uniform, ma'am?" asked Cadet Bradley Thompson, son of a 3-star general. His voice dripped with mock respect. "Shouldn't instructors follow dress code?" Sarah smiled calmly. "I'll earn my uniform when I earn your respect, Cadet Thompson." The class erupted in snickers. These kids had heard every motivational speech, every tough guy routine. They had broken instructors who screamed, who tried to intimidate, who played mind games. What they didn't expect was someone who seemed genuinely unbothered by their attitude. During the first week, they tested her boundaries systematically. Equipment went missing during her classes. Smoke bombs appeared in her office. Someone superglued her desk drawers shut. Through it all, Sarah remained patient, almost amused. She would clean up their messes, reset her classroom, and continue teaching as if nothing had happened. The pranks escalated. They programmed her computer to play circus music randomly. They filled her gym bag with shaving cream. They even convinced the kitchen staff that she had requested a birthday cake made entirely of sardines. Each time, Sarah would acknowledge the creativity, clean up, and move on. Cadet Marcus Webb, whose father owned half the defense contracts in the state, began to get frustrated with her lack of reaction. During combat training, he deliberately ignored her instructions, encouraging others to do the same. When she corrected him, he would question her qualifications loudly, wondering aloud what a civilian could possibly teach them about military tactics. "Have you ever even held a real weapon, Ms. Martinez?" Marcus asked one day, his voice carrying across the training yard. "My father says civilians don't understand what real combat is like." Sarah paused, considering her response carefully. "Your father is probably right about many civilians, Cadet Webb. What do you think real combat is like?" Marcus puffed up, eager to show off. "It's about strength, aggression, taking control. It's about proving you're the alpha." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "Interesting perspective. Anyone else have thoughts?" Several cadets jumped in, each trying to sound more knowledgeable than the last. They talked about firepower, dominance, fear tactics. Sarah listened to each contribution without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions that made them think deeper about their assumptions. As weeks passed, something subtle began to shift. Sarah's unconventional teaching methods started getting results. Instead of lecturing about teamwork, she created scenarios where cadets had to rely on each other to succeed. Rather than demanding respect, she earned it through consistency and competence. During a particularly challenging obstacle course, Cadet Jennifer Liu struggled with a rope climb. She was one of the smaller students and had been the target of ridicule from some of her classmates. As she failed repeatedly, tears of frustration began to flow. "Just give up, Liu," called out Marcus. "Some people aren't cut out for this." Sarah stepped forward. "Cadet Liu, what's the hardest thing you've ever accomplished?" Jennifer wiped her eyes, thinking, "I learned to play violin when everyone said I was too young and too small. How did that feel when you finally mastered it? Like I could do anything?" Sarah smiled. "Same principle here. Your body is stronger than you think. Your grip technique needs adjustment, but you have the determination. Try again, but This time, use your legs more than your arms. Wrap your ankles around the rope and use your core. With Sarah's coaching, Jennifer made it halfway up before falling again. But instead of mockery, several classmates began offering encouragement. Sarah had somehow created an environment where helping each other became more appealing than tearing each other down. This didn't sit well with the core group of troublemakers. Marcus, Bradley, and their followers felt their influence slipping. They had built their identity around being untouchable, superior to authority figures. Sarah's quiet competence threatened that foundation. The breaking point came during a wilderness survival exercise. Sarah had designed a 3-day camping trip where cadets had to work in teams to complete various challenges. It was meant to build leadership skills and cooperation. Instead, it became a stage for their most dangerous prank yet. On the second night, as Sarah slept in her tent, Marcus and Bradley hatched their plan. They had discovered something interesting while researching their instructor. There was virtually no information about Sarah Martinez online. No social media, no previous employment records at other schools, no family photos. To them, this meant she was probably a fraud, someone who had lied about her qualifications. She's probably some wannabe who watched too many war movies, Bradley whispered to his conspirators. Time to expose her for what she really is. They waited until the early hours of the morning, when everyone was asleep. The camping area was on a plateau overlooking a valley, with sheer rock faces on 3 sides. There was one particularly dramatic outcropping that jutted out over a 40-foot drop into a thick grove of pine trees. The plan was simple but cruel. They would wake Sarah, claim there was an emergency that required her immediate attention, and lead her to the rocky outcropping in the darkness. Once there, they would push her off the edge. The drop wasn't fatal, probably, but it would terrify her, humiliate her, and hopefully break her composure enough that she would quit. At 3 a.m, Bradley crept to Sarah's tent. "Ms. Martinez," he whispered urgently. "We need help. Marcus is missing, and we think he might be hurt." Sarah was awake immediately, alert and ready for action. She emerged from her tent fully dressed, as if she had been sleeping in her clothes. This struck Bradley as odd, but he pushed the thought aside. "Where did you last see him?" Sarah asked, her voice calm, but focused. "Over by the cliff edge. He said he heard something and went to investigate. That was 2 hours ago." Sarah nodded and followed Bradley through the darkness. Her night vision seemed remarkably good. She navigated the rocky terrain without a flashlight while Bradley stumbled repeatedly. When they reached the designated spot, Marcus and 2 other cadets emerged from hiding. "Surprise," Marcus said with a cruel smile. "There's no emergency, but there's about to be." Sarah looked at the 4 young men surrounding her, then at the cliff edge barely 3 feet away. She assessed the situation with the speed of someone trained for such moments. 4 adversaries, 1 escape route, 40-foot drop with unknown landing conditions. "I see," she said calmly. "And what exactly did you have in mind?" Bradley laughed nervously. The complete lack of fear in her voice was unnerving. "We're going to show everyone what you really are. A fake, a fraud, someone who doesn't belong here." "By doing what exactly?" Marcus stepped closer, emboldened by her apparent passivity. "By giving you a little push. Maybe a 40-foot reality check will help you remember your place." Sarah nodded thoughtfully, as if considering the proposal. "That's an interesting plan. Have you thought through the consequences?" "The only consequence is you packing your bags and leaving," Marcus sneered. "Unless you want to explain to Colonel Harrison how you were so incompetent that you let cadets overpower you." What happened next would be talked about for years at Riverside Military Academy. Sarah didn't retreat or plead or threaten to report them. Instead, she smiled, her expression so calm and confident that it made all 4 cadets suddenly uncertain. "Cadet Webb," she said quietly, "you asked me once if I'd ever held a real weapon." Before anyone could react, Sarah moved. Her hand shot out and grabbed Marcus by the wrist with crushing force. In one fluid motion, she pivoted and used his own momentum to send him stumbling backward, not toward the cliff, but away from it, where he crashed into Bradley and sent both of them tumbling to the ground. The other two cadets rushed her simultaneously. Sarah sidestepped the first attacker with minimal effort, using his forward momentum to redirect him harmlessly past her. The second, she stopped with a simple palm strike to his chest that left him gasping and sitting down hard on the rocky ground. In less than 10 seconds, all four cadets were on the ground, completely neutralized, while Sarah stood exactly where she had started. She hadn't hurt any of them seriously, but she had demonstrated a level of combat skill that left them speechless. To answer your question, Sarah said, her voice still perfectly calm. Yes, I have held real weapons. Many times. Now, I think we should head back to camp and discuss what just happened. As they walked back in stunned silence, Marcus's mind raced. That level of training, that speed and precision, it wasn't something you learned in civilian self-defense classes. His father had shown him enough military demonstrations to recognize professional-level combat skills when he saw them. Back at camp, Sarah gathered the four cadets around the dying embers of the campfire. They sat in a circle. The atmosphere completely changed from the arrogant confidence they had shown an hour earlier. I want you to understand something, Sarah began, her voice gentle but serious. What you attempted tonight wasn't a prank. It was assault with the potential for serious injury or death. In the civilian world, you would be facing criminal charges. In the military world, you would be facing court-martial. Bradley found his voice first. We weren't really going to hurt you. It was just supposed to scare you. Sarah looked at each of them in turn. Cadet Thompson, if I had fallen from that cliff and been seriously injured or killed, do you think your intention would matter to my family? Do you think it would matter to the investigation that would follow? The weight of what they had almost done began to settle on the young men. They had been so focused on humiliating their instructor that they hadn't considered the real-world consequences of their actions. Here's what's going to happen, Sarah continued. You're going to return to the academy, and you're going to think very seriously about what kind of people you want to become. You can continue down the path of entitlement and cruelty, where you can choose to become something better. Marcus, still rubbing his wrist where she had grabbed him, looked up. Who are you really? That wasn't normal instructor training. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight of experience that made them all lean in to listen. I'm someone who learned the hard way that real strength isn't about overpowering others or proving your dominance. Real strength is about protecting people who can't protect themselves, about making difficult choices under pressure, and about maintaining your integrity when no one is watching. She stood up, brushing dirt off her pants. Get some sleep. We have a long hike back tomorrow, and you'll need your energy for the conversations you're going to have with Colonel Harrison. As the cadets settled back into their tents, none of them slept well. They had expected to break their instructor that night. Instead, she had demonstrated a level of capability that forced them to question everything they thought they knew about strength, authority, and what it meant to be truly formidable. The next morning's hike back to the academy was conducted in relative silence. Sarah maintained her usual calm demeanor, pointing out wildlife and terrain features as if nothing unusual had happened. But the four cadets couldn't shake the image of how effortlessly she had controlled the situation. When they arrived back at Riverside, word of the confrontation spread quickly through the cadet rumor mill. Details got exaggerated and distorted, but the core message was clear. Ms. Martinez was not to be underestimated. Colonel Harrison called the four cadets to his office that afternoon. Sarah had given him a factual report of the incident, leaving out none of the details. The colonel's face grew darker as he read her account. Attempted assault on an instructor, he said finally, looking up at the four young men standing at attention before his desk. Conspiracy to commit assault. Reckless endangerment. Do you understand that any one of these charges could result in your immediate expulsion? Marcus swallowed hard. Expulsion would mean losing his appointment to West Point, destroying his military career before it began. Sir, we didn't mean for it to go that far. It was supposed to be a prank. Colonel Harrison stood up, his voice rising. A prank? You planned to push an instructor off a 40-foot cliff And you call it prank? What kind of military officers do you think you'll make if this is how you handle authority figures you don't respect? The cadets had no answer. In the cold light of day, with the potential consequences laid out before them, their actions seemed not just cruel, but monumentally stupid. There is one reason, and one reason only, that you are not being expelled today, Harrison continued. Ms. Martinez has requested that you be given a second chance. She believes you can learn from this experience and become better officers. He leaned forward across his desk. I disagree with her assessment, but I respect her judgment. You will each write a formal letter of apology. You will complete 100 hours of community service, and you will attend mandatory counseling sessions to address whatever psychological issues led you to think this was acceptable behavior. As the cadets filed out of his office, Colonel Harrison reflected on Sarah's report. Her description of the physical confrontation had been precise and professional, but it had also raised questions. The level of tactical awareness and combat skill she had demonstrated was far beyond what any civilian instructor should possess. That evening, Harrison made some phone calls to contacts and military personnel. What he discovered would change everything about how Riverside Military Academy viewed their unassuming new instructor. Colonel Harrison's first call was to his old friend General Morrison at the Pentagon. They had served together in Iraq and maintained contact through the years. If anyone could help him verify Sarah Martinez's background, it would be Morrison. "Jim, I need you to run a background check on someone for me," Harrison said, settling into his office chair with Sarah's personnel file. Name is Sarah Elena Martinez, 28 years old, hired as a physical training instructor. What's the problem? Security clearance issue? Not exactly. She just handled 4 cadets who tried to assault her with a level of combat skill that has me asking questions. I'm looking at her resume right now, and it's remarkably thin. High school diploma, some college, previous employment at a private gym. Nothing that explains what I witnessed. There was a pause on the other end of the line. What exactly did she do? Harrison read from Sarah's incident report, describing how she had neutralized 4 attackers in seconds without causing serious injury. The precision and restraint suggest professional training. Military training. I'll make some calls and get back to you within 48 hours, Morrison promised. In the meantime, keep this quiet. If she is military, there might be reasons for the secrecy. While Harrison waited for answers, life at Riverside continued with a new undercurrent of tension. The 4 cadets involved in the cliff incident were noticeably subdued, completing their punishment duties without complaint. But more interesting was the change in the rest of Class 7. Word of what had happened spread through the cadet barracks like wildfire. Details became increasingly embellished with each telling, but the core facts remained consistent. Their mild-mannered instructor had effortlessly handled 4 attackers in complete darkness. Some cadets were skeptical, others intrigued, but all were curious. Sarah noticed the change immediately. Cadets who had previously been disruptive now paid attention during her classes. Questions that had once been challenges designed to expose her ignorance became genuine requests for knowledge. The atmosphere in her training sessions shifted from hostility to something approaching respect. During a hand-to-hand combat class, Cadet Jennifer Liu raised her hand. "Ms. Martinez, could you show us what you did to stop those guys?" Sarah considered the question carefully. She had been hoping to avoid demonstrations of her advanced skills, but the curiosity was natural. Self-defense techniques can be dangerous if not practiced properly, but I can show you some basic principles. She called for a volunteer, and, to everyone's surprise, Marcus Webb stepped forward. The same cadet who had planned to push her off a cliff now stood, ready to learn from her. "The most important thing to understand," Sarah began, positioning Marcus in front of her, "is that real self-defense isn't about aggression or overpowering someone. It's about using an attacker's energy against them." She demonstrated a simple redirect technique, having Marcus grab her wrist and then showing how to break free using leverage rather than strength. The movement was so smooth and effortless that several cadets asked her to repeat it. "Can you show us something more advanced?" asked Bradley Thompson, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine interest. Sarah hesitated. Advanced techniques would require her to draw on training that officially didn't exist in her background. But the eager faces of her students made the decision for her. All right, but remember, these techniques are only for serious self-defense situations. Never use them unless you're in real danger. What followed was a demonstration that left the entire class speechless. Sarah showed them how to disarm an opponent holding a knife, how to escape from various holds and chokes, and how to neutralize multiple attackers. Each technique was executed with a precision that spoke of years of intensive training. Cadet Rebecca Stone, whose mother was a Marine Corps colonel, recognized what she was seeing. After class, she approached Sarah privately. "Ma'am, I've seen my mother train with Marines my whole life. What you just showed us, that's not civilian self-defense. That's military close-quarters combat." Sarah looked at the young woman carefully. Rebecca was one of her most perceptive students, serious about her military aspirations, and already accepted to the Naval Academy. "What makes you think that, Cadet Stone?" "The way you move, the terminology you use, the focus on situational awareness. My mother has the same presence. She calls it operational mindset." Sarah nodded slowly. "Your mother sounds like a smart woman. What else has she taught you about military service?" "That the best warriors are often the ones who talk about it the least. That real veterans sometimes prefer to let their actions speak for them." It was a perceptive observation, and Sarah found herself respecting the young cadet's insight. "Those are wise words. What do you plan to do with that wisdom?" "Learn everything I can from instructors who clearly know what they're talking about," Rebecca replied with a small smile. Meanwhile, Colonel Harrison's investigation was yielding troubling results. General Morrison called back after 36 hours with news that complicated everything. "Jim, your instructor doesn't exist," Morrison said without preamble. "What do you mean?" "I mean Sarah Elena Martinez, as described in your personnel file, is a fabricated identity. The Social Security number belongs to a different person who died in infancy. The previous employment at that gym, the gym has no record of employing anyone by that name. Even her driver's license was issued only 6 months ago." Harrison felt a chill. "So she's what? A spy? A terrorist?" "Hold on, it gets more interesting. I had my people dig deeper, and we found something unusual. There are traces of a heavily classified personnel file that was sealed and buried about 8 months ago. Someone with very high-level clearance went to a lot of trouble to erase someone's military record. Witness protection? More likely medical retirement with classified service record. The timing suggests someone who was pulled out of active duty and given a new identity for their own protection." Harrison absorbed this information. "So you think she's military after all?" "I think she's former military with classified service history that someone very powerful decided needed to disappear. The question is whether she's running from something or hiding from someone." That evening, Harrison decided to confront Sarah directly. He found her in the Academy's small gym, working out alone after hours. She was running through a series of exercises that confirmed his suspicions. This was someone maintaining combat-ready physical conditioning. "Ms. Martinez, we need to talk." Sarah finished her set of pull-ups and dropped down, grabbing a towel to wipe her hands. "Of course, Colonel. What can I do for you? You can start by telling me who you really are." Sarah's expression didn't change, but Harrison noticed her stance shift almost imperceptibly. It was subtle, but he recognized it, a combat-ready position disguised as casual alertness. "I'm exactly who I said I am. A physical training instructor, with a fabricated identity and military skills that suggest special operations training." This time, Sarah did react. The mask of civilian instructor slipped for just a moment, revealing someone calculating threat assessments and escape routes. Then, the calm expression returned. "I think you might be mistaken, Colonel." Harrison sat down on a nearby weight bench, making himself appear less threatening. "Sarah, I've been in the military for 22 years. I know operators when I see them. The question isn't whether you're former military, it's whether you're here under orders or if you're running from something." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, studying the older man's face. Finally, she sat down across from him. What did your investigation turn up? Enough to know that Sarah Martinez is a cover identity created by someone with serious intelligence connections. Not enough to know why. Sarah nodded slowly. And you want to know if I'm a threat to your academy. I want to know if my cadets are safe. Some of them are the children of very important people. If you're here because you're being hunted, or if you're here on some kind of covert assignment, I need to know. It was a fair question, and Sarah found herself respecting the colonel's direct approach. She had been dreading this conversation for months, but now that it was happening, she felt almost relieved. I'm not a threat to your cadets or your academy, she said carefully. I'm not here on any assignment. And while I'm hiding from some things, they're not the kind that would endanger anyone else. What kind of things? Sarah looked down at her hands, noting the small scars that no amount of civilian living could completely hide. The kind that come from doing things you can never talk about, in places that officially don't exist, for reasons that will never be declassified. Harrison understood. He had known operators who carried similar burdens. Men and women who had served in the shadows, protecting national interests through actions that could never be acknowledged or celebrated. How long? 8 years active duty. Deployed more often than not. Branch. Sarah hesitated. Admitting to Navy service was one thing, but her actual unit was still classified. Navy? Special operations? Something like that. Harrison nodded. In the military, something like that was often code for activities so classified that even acknowledging them could be dangerous. Medical retirement? You could say that. Sarah's left leg, the one with the slight limp, suddenly made sense. Combat injury severe enough to end a career, but not severe enough to prevent civilian employment. And the new identity? Some missions make enemies. Some enemies have long memories and significant resources. Sometimes the best way to protect someone is to make them disappear into civilian life. It was a sobering explanation. Sarah wasn't just a former operator trying to rebuild her life. She was someone whose service had been so sensitive that her own government had helped her disappear for her own protection. Do you miss it? Harrison asked quietly. Sarah looked up, and for the first time since he had known her, she let her guard down completely. The pain in her eyes was raw and immediate. Every day, she whispered. But missing it doesn't mean I regret leaving. Some things you do because they need to be done, not because you want to do them. Harrison stood up, decision made. Your secret is safe with me, but I have conditions. Name them. First, if your past ever threatens my academy or my cadets in any way, you tell me immediately. Second, if you ever need help, if whoever you're hiding from finds you, you don't try to handle it alone. Sarah nodded. Understood. And third, Harrison continued with a slight smile, you stop holding back so much in your training classes. These kids could benefit from learning from someone with your experience. Colonel, I can't exactly tell them I'm a former Navy SEAL. Harrison paused. Navy SEAL? I thought you said Navy. Sarah realized her slip immediately. She had been careful never to specify her exact role, but the stress of the conversation had caused her to reveal more than intended. SEAL team. Harrison pressed gently. Does it matter? Sarah asked, but her tone suggested it was neither denial nor confirmation. Only because it explains a few things. Like how you handled 4 cadets without breaking a sweat. Like how you can navigate in complete darkness. Like how you maintain that level of physical conditioning. Sarah was quiet, realizing that her cover was essentially blown. Colonel Harrison knew enough now to piece together the rest. For what it's worth, Harrison continued, having a former SEAL training my cadets isn't exactly a problem. The problem is that they don't know what they're learning from. It has to stay that way. Agreed. But there are ways to share your knowledge without revealing your background. These kids are future military officers. They deserve the best training they can get. As they talked, both were unaware that Cadet Marcus Webb was in the hallway outside, having come to return equipment to the gym. He had heard enough of the conversation to understand that their unassuming instructor was far more than she appeared. The next morning, Marcus faced a dilemma. The woman he had tried to humiliate and assault was apparently a former Navy SEAL who could have seriously hurt him and his friends but chose not to. The knowledge was both humbling and terrifying. He thought about what to do with this information. His first instinct was to share it with his friends, to spread the news through the academy. But something held him back. Sarah had shown him mercy when she could have destroyed him. She had chosen to teach rather than punish, to guide rather than retaliate. During her next class, Marcus watched Sarah with new eyes. Every demonstration, every piece of advice, every training technique took on new meaning when he understood it was coming from someone who had operated at the highest levels of military special operations. As the class practiced basic combat stances, Sarah corrected Marcus's form with the same patience she had always shown. Keep your center of gravity lower, Cadet Webb. You want to be stable, but ready to move in any direction. Yes, ma'am, Marcus replied, making the adjustment. Then, quietly enough that only she could hear, he added, "Thank you." Sarah glanced at him sharply, but his expression was sincere. Whatever he knew or suspected, it had changed his attitude completely. After class, as the other cadets filed out, Marcus lingered. "Ma'am, I wanted to apologize again for what happened during the camping trip." "You already apologized, Cadet Webb. Actions speak louder than words." "I know, but I also wanted you to know that I understand now why you didn't hurt us that night. You could have, but you chose not to." Sarah studied his face carefully. "What makes you think I could have hurt you?" Marcus met her gaze steadily. "Because I'm starting to understand the difference between someone who talks tough and someone who actually is tough." It was a mature response, and Sarah found herself genuinely pleased with his growth. "And what do you plan to do with that understanding?" "Learn everything you're willing to teach me," Marcus replied, "and maybe become the kind of person who chooses mercy over revenge." As Marcus left the gym, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since her arrival at Riverside. The secret she had worked so hard to protect was slowly unraveling, but perhaps that wasn't entirely bad. These cadets were learning lessons about real strength, real courage, and real leadership, lessons they could only learn from someone who had lived them. But Sarah also knew that her peaceful civilian life was becoming increasingly precarious. The more her true nature revealed itself, the greater the risk that the wrong people would take notice. And there were still those from her past who would be very interested to learn that the woman they believed to be dead was alive and teaching at a military academy. The question was how long she could maintain the balance between being an effective instructor and staying hidden from those who wished her harm. 3 months after Colonel Harrison's investigation, Sarah had settled into a comfortable routine at Riverside Military Academy. Her classes had become the most popular among cadets, and her unorthodox teaching methods were producing remarkable results. Class 7, once the most problematic group in the Academy's history, had transformed into a cohesive unit of future leaders. The change was most dramatic in Marcus Webb. The arrogant young man who had once planned to push her off a cliff had become her most dedicated student. He arrived early to every class, stayed late to practice techniques, and had begun mentoring younger cadets who struggled with the physical requirements. "Ms. Martinez," Marcus said after a particularly challenging training session, "I've been accepted to West Point for next year." Sarah smiled genuinely. "Congratulations, Cadet Webb. You've earned it. I wanted to thank you for not giving up on me. I know I didn't deserve a second chance after what I did. Everyone deserves a second chance. Marcus, what matters is what you do with it." What Sarah didn't know was that her improved relationship with the cadets had attracted attention beyond the academy walls. Videos of her training sessions, recorded by proud cadets and posted on social media, had been noticed by someone who recognized her movement patterns and tactical approaches. Viktor Kozlov had been tracking Sarah Martinez for 8 months. A former Russian Spetsnaz operator turned mercenary, he had been hired by a Syrian arms dealer whom Sarah's SEAL team had neutralized during a classified operation 2 years earlier. The arms dealer's son wanted revenge against the team responsible for his father's death, and he had unlimited resources to make it happen. Most of Sarah's former teammates were still active duty and protected by their classified status. But Sarah had been medically retired and given a new identity, making her vulnerable. Kozlov had been methodically tracking down leads, following the paper trail of her new life. The breakthrough came when facial recognition software matched a woman in a Riverside Academy training video to archive surveillance footage from Sarah's last known appearance 8 months earlier. The match wasn't perfect. She had changed her hair color and lost weight during her recovery, but it was enough. On a cold Friday evening in December, as Sarah prepared to leave the academy for the weekend, Kozlov and 2 associates took positions around the campus. They had studied her routines for a week and knew she always stayed late on Fridays to prepare for Monday's classes. Sarah was locking up the gym when her combat instincts suddenly screamed danger. The feeling was unmistakable, the heightened awareness that had kept her alive through dozens of operations. Someone was watching her with hostile intent. She continued her normal routine while scanning the environment peripherally. 3 men positioned to cover escape routes, professional spacing, and movement patterns. This wasn't a random crime. This was a targeted operation. Sarah's mind raced through options. Her apartment was 15 minutes away, too far to lead them away from the academy. The main building was locked and would take precious seconds to access. But the automotive shop where cadets learn vehicle maintenance was only 50 yards away, and she knew it would be unlocked. She walked calmly toward her car, keys in hand, while analyzing the tactical situation. 3 operators against 1, but they were on her territory. She knew every building, every exit, every possible advantage the campus offered. As she reached her car, the men began to move in. Sarah waited until they committed to their approach, then suddenly sprinted toward the automotive shop. The move caught them off guard. They had expected her to try to drive away or run toward the main building. She reached the shop and dove inside just as the first shots rang out. The men weren't trying to kill her immediately. They wanted her alive for interrogation about her former teammates' current assignments. But they were willing to wound her to make her compliant. Inside the shop, Sarah quickly assessed her resources: hand tools, hydraulic equipment, and, most importantly, several cadets' personal vehicles in various stages of repair. She grabbed a large wrench and positioned herself behind a pickup truck, using the engine block as cover. "Sarah Mitchell," a voice called out with a slight Russian accent. "Or do you prefer Martinez these days?" Sarah's blood ran cold. They knew her real name, her original identity from before the witness protection program. That meant they had serious intelligence resources. "We just want to talk," the voice continued. "We know you were part of the team that killed Mahmoud al-Rashid in Damascus. We need information about your teammates." Sarah remained silent, calculating angles and distances. 3 men, probably armed with pistols based on the sound of the gunshots. The shop had 2 exits, the main door they had come through, and a back entrance that led to the parking lot. "We know you're injured," the voice said. "Honorable discharge for injuries sustained in combat. How much do you think that leg can handle before it gives out completely?" It was psychological warfare, designed to make her doubt her physical capabilities. But Sarah had been through 8 months of rehabilitation and knew exactly what her limitations were. More importantly, she knew what she was still capable of. A shadow moved past the window, and Sarah threw the wrench with precision. It struck the window frame just as someone was moving past, causing them to duck reflexively and giving away their position. "Professional reflexes," the voice called out approvingly. "Al-Rashid's son will be pleased to know his father was killed by worthy opponents." That confirmed what Sarah had suspected. This was a revenge operation by the family of someone her team had eliminated. Such vendettas were always a risk in special operations, but usually the targets remained safely anonymous in classified service. Suddenly, she heard voices outside. Young voices speaking in the urgent tones of people responding to an emergency. Her heart sank as she realized cadets were approaching the building, probably having heard the gunshots. "Stay back," she shouted toward the voices. "Call security and stay away from the building." But Marcus Webb's voice called back. "Ms. Martinez, are you hurt? We're coming in." "No," Sarah yelled. "These men are armed. Call the police and stay clear The Russian voice laughed. How touching. Your students want to save you. Perhaps we should have a conversation with them about your real identity. That threat changed everything for Sarah. She had been prepared to handle this situation defensively, to wait for law enforcement and minimize casualties. But threatening her students activated every protective instinct she possessed. Sarah emerged from behind the truck, moving with a fluid precision that had made her one of the most effective operators in her SEAL team. She had spotted two of the three men during their conversation, one by the main entrance, one by the side window. The third would be covering the rear exit. She moved toward the main entrance with controlled aggression, using vehicle cover to mask her approach. The operative by the door was professional, but not expecting her to attack. Sarah's training emphasized that the best defense was often an unexpected offense. The confrontation was over in seconds. Sarah disarmed the first operative with a move that broke two of his fingers and left him unconscious on the floor. She used his weapon to engage the second man, who was attempting to circle around behind her. Her marksmanship training served her well. She wounded him in the shoulder, neutralizing the threat without causing fatal injury. The third operative, hearing the commotion, came through the rear entrance just as Sarah anticipated. She was waiting for him, positioned behind a tool cabinet with a clear line of sight to the doorway. "Drop your weapon," she commanded, her own gun trained on center mass. The man complied, realizing his mission had failed completely. As he raised his hands, Sarah could see the calculation in his eyes. He was evaluating whether to surrender or attempt something desperate. "Smart choice," Sarah said. "Now call out to my students and tell them it's safe to approach." Just then, Marcus Webb appeared in the main doorway, followed by three other cadets. They stopped short at the scene before them, their mild-mannered instructor standing over three subdued attackers, holding a pistol with the confidence of someone very familiar with firearms. "Everyone okay?" Marcus asked, his voice steady despite the shock of what he was witnessing. "We're fine," Sarah replied, keeping her weapon trained on the conscious attacker. "Did someone call the police?" "Jennifer called 911 as soon as we heard shots," Marcus confirmed. "They should be here in 5 minutes." As they waited for law enforcement, Sarah used zip ties from the shop to secure the two conscious attackers. The cadets watched in amazement as she efficiently processed the scene, checking the unconscious man's pulse and securing all weapons. "Ma'am," asked Cadet Rebecca Stone quietly, "what just happened here?" Sarah looked at the four young people who had risked their own safety to come to her aid. They deserved honesty, but the full truth was still too dangerous to share. "Sometimes people from your past catch up with you," she said simply. "These men were looking for information about some former colleagues of mine." Marcus stepped closer. "Former colleagues from when you were in the Navy?" Sarah met his gaze steadily. She had been careful never to confirm her military service to the cadets, but the current situation made denials pointless. "Yes." The police arrived within minutes, followed quickly by FBI agents who took over the scene when they realized it involved former Special Operations personnel. Colonel Harrison appeared shortly afterward, having been notified of the incident. As Sarah gave her statement to federal investigators, she watched her cadets being interviewed about what they had witnessed. They handled the questioning with remarkable composure, providing clear and accurate accounts without speculation or embellishment. Later, after the attackers had been taken into custody and the scene had been processed, Colonel Harrison found Sarah sitting alone in his office. "The FBI agent told me these men were hired by a Syrian arms dealer seeking revenge for his father's death," Harrison said quietly. "Something like that," Sarah confirmed. "He also told me that your former unit was responsible for eliminating a significant terrorist financier and weapon supplier, that the operation saved an estimated 300 civilian lives." Sarah didn't respond. Operational details were still classified, and discussing them would violate her security clearances. "The question now," Harrison continued, "is whether this incident puts my academy and my cadets at risk. Are there other people looking for you?" It was a fair question, and one Sarah had been considering since the attack. "Probably not. Al-Rashid's organization was relatively small, and his son seems to have exhausted his resources on this operation. But I can't guarantee my presence here won't attract other attention." Harrison nodded. "The FBI is recommending that you accept relocation to a new identity and location. They say the Witness Protection Program can arrange something on the West Coast." Sarah looked out the window at the academy grounds where she had found unexpected peace and purpose. The thought of leaving felt like another kind of death. "What do you recommend, Colonel?" "I recommend you make the decision based on what you need, not what others think is safest. You found something here worth protecting. The question is whether you're willing to fight for it." Before Sarah could answer, there was a knock on the office door. Marcus Webb entered with the 3 other cadets who had responded to the gunshots. "Ma'am," Marcus said formally, "we have a request." "Go ahead, Cadet Webb. We've been talking, and we want you to know that what happened tonight doesn't change anything for us. You're still our instructor, and we still want to learn from you." Rebecca Stone stepped forward. "We also want you to know that if anyone else comes looking for you, they'll have to go through us first." It was a brave declaration from young people who had no real understanding of what they were offering to face. But the loyalty and courage behind it moved Sarah more than any military decoration ever had. "That's very generous," Sarah said carefully, "but these aren't the kind of problems you solve with courage and determination. These are professional operators with serious resources." "Maybe," Marcus replied, "but we're not helpless cadets anymore. You taught us that." Sarah looked at each of them. Marcus, who had transformed from a privileged bully into a natural leader. Rebecca, whose strategic mind and courage reminded Sarah of herself at that age. Jennifer Liu, whose determination had overcome every obstacle placed before her. And Bradley Thompson, whose newfound humility had revealed genuine strength. "You did that yourselves," Sarah said. "I just provided some guidance." Colonel Harrison cleared his throat. "There is another option we haven't discussed. The Academy Board has been considering expanding our Special Operations Preparatory Program. We could use someone with your qualifications as a permanent instructor with appropriate security measures and federal support." Sarah felt a spark of hope. "What kind of position?" "Department Head for Advanced Tactical Training. Officially, you would be preparing our top cadets for special operations careers. Unofficially, you would be doing what you're already doing, turning entitled kids into real leaders." It was an offer that would allow her to stay in the place where she had found purpose while acknowledging her real qualifications and experience. More importantly, it would provide federal oversight and protection that might discourage future revenge seekers. There would be conditions, Harrison continued. Complete background disclosure to federal authorities, regular security briefings, and a small protective detail during high-risk periods. Sarah considered the offer. It meant giving up the anonymity she had worked so hard to maintain, but it also meant no longer hiding who she really was. After months of pretending to be someone else, the thought of being herself again was deeply appealing. "What do you think?" she asked the cadets. "I think we'd be honored to learn from someone who spent 8 years defending our country in ways we'll probably never fully understand," Marcus said. "I think you've already proven you can handle whatever comes," Rebecca added. "I think you belong here," Jennifer said simply. Sarah looked at Colonel Harrison. "What will my official title be?" "Professor Martinez, Director of Advanced Tactical Studies." Sarah Martinez, for the first time in 8 months, her real name felt right. "I accept." 6 months later, the Advanced Tactical Studies program at Riverside Military Academy had become one of the most respected preparatory programs for special operations careers in the country. Sarah's classes were attended not only by Riverside cadets, but by young officers from other military schools seeking specialized training. Marcus Webb graduated as class valedictorian and headed to West Point with a letter of recommendation from his tactical studies professor that opened doors throughout the military establishment. Rebecca Stone received an appointment to the Naval Academy and a guaranteed slot in the Marine Corps officer program. Jennifer Liu and Bradley Thompson both received full scholarships to civilian universities with ROTC programs. On graduation day, As Sarah watched her former students receive their diplomas, she reflected on the unexpected turn her life had taken. She had come to Riverside hoping to disappear into civilian obscurity. Instead, she had found a new mission that utilized her skills and experience in ways she had never imagined. The past would always be part of who she was, but it no longer defined her future. She was no longer a former Navy SEAL trying to hide from her history. She was Professor Sarah Martinez, trainer of the next generation of military leaders. And when Marcus Webb, now Cadet Private Webb at West Point, called her 3 months later to tell her he had been selected for the elite Ranger training program, Sarah knew she had found her true calling. "Thank you for not giving up on me when I deserved it," Marcus said over the phone. "Thank you for not giving up on yourself," Sarah replied. "That's what real warriors do." As she hung up the phone and prepared for another day of training future leaders, Sarah realized that sometimes the most important missions were the ones you never saw coming. And sometimes the greatest victories were achieved not through force of arms, but through the patient work of turning potential into excellence, one student at a time.